Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'll call the public hearing to order. It's a public hearing for Bylaw 2017-25, Stewart Creek Low Density Residential. The purpose of the bylaw is to amend the land use district R2A SC located in Stewart Creek area of the Three Sisters, as well as propose rezoning on 2 lots, also in the same area. The public hearing will proceed as follows. First, administration will provide an overview of the matter under consideration, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their request or speak to their request. Council will then have the opportunity to ask questions of either administration or the applicant, and after council has asked our questions, we'll invite members of the public to speak. Once everybody that's in the public has had their say, we'll look to the municipal clerk to read into the record names of any those who had written submissions, and then finally, before I adjourn the meeting, administration will be given an opportunity to provide closing comments. And after the meeting adjourns, the municipal clerk will publish a record of public submissions that includes all written submissions received regarding the matter, regardless of whether the author is present or not. And with that, we will move to item number 2, the administrative briefing. Mr. Fish.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Yes, as introduced, before you now is Bylaw 2017-25, actually before the public. And so this received first reading last month. There are 2 key aspects to this bylaw. One was what the applicant initially submitted, which was amendments to the R2A SC district. The area has already been the subject of a rezoning, actually 2 rezonings. So this is the 3rd rezoning for this area. The second one was sort of some minor boundary adjustments. The first one was more substantive, and then this one is somewhat more substantive as well. Given that history, and given that administration and council have some other potential objectives for this area, administration requested if we could add to the applicant's bylaw the rezoning of the 2 parcels. So I just want to be clear that this was not initiated by the applicant, but by the fact that we have a bylaw in front of council, we wanted to try and be expedient and efficient with it. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about the 2 parcels and why administration initiated that, and just give a bit of background on those. So it's actually lot 28 MR, the orange lot, and lot 27, the green lot. And I will talk more about those. So that's what the rezoning was proposed for. With respect to lot 28 MR, the MR lot, it was in response to council direction, and that was related to the, past direction to pursue selling a portion of MR dedication in Stewart Creek Phase 3, the proceeds of which would go to the cash in lieu municipal reserve account. So this is a subdivision of the entire area. The Phase 3 area effectively starts sort of at the edge of this boundary and carries on here, as well as this area right up through here. So that's the Stewart Creek Phase 3 subdivision area. The highlighted parcels in blue are the 6 municipal reserve parcels in the area. And so administration conducted an evaluation of those and felt that there were critical pedestrian connections in the others. Lot 28 MR is this piece here, and is less critical to the overall network of both pedestrian movement and open space in the area. That lot, as part of the subdivision application, currently has improvements approved and planned for it that are the obligation now of the developer of the subdivision, and so there will need to be some conversations should council pursue alternatives on this site. It's relatively modest, the improvements. Some of the salient pieces are there is a small, well, there's a sidewalk along the front, There's a small pathway here with a couple of benches and some rocks planned, some landscaping, somewhat unrelated to the MR specifically. This is the location of the waste and recycling containers, one of 4 locations within the overall subdivision. So all of those are factors that would need to be considered in looking at options for Lot 28 MR. So there is a disposition process, and that is separate from a rezoning process. Again, this is a confusing piece, I know. So there's a designation of land, whether it's fee simple or condominium, or more relevantly, municipal reserve, environmental reserve, or school reserve. So to change that requires a separate process. As we all recall, we went through that process on the daycare site. And so there is a separate disposition process that is coming to council next week for recommendation to schedule a public hearing, which is required on that as well. The other lot, Lot 27, relates to community lands and the Three Sisters road closures. So this is a map out of the 2004 area structure plans that were approved, both Stewart Creek and the Resort Center. And it identified some lands that were anticipated to potentially be closed and then exchanged with the town. I know this is a very detailed map. The important piece is right in the dead center there where the green circle is. There's a portion of previous road allowances. And I'm going to zoom in and make this relevant to the Stewart Creek Phase 3 map. And so that area that was identified as blue, you can see is here. And so this is what was road allowance. You can see all the way through there. That road allowance was closed and transferred to Three Sisters Mountain Village as part of the overall subdivision plan. In exchange, the town will be, the intent is to receive this parcel, Lot 27, in exchange for the closed road allowance. So the agreement that we have around road closures is that it requires the town to pay the servicing costs associated with, or pay a share of the servicing costs for the overall subdivision. The subdivision, in the end, it's being serviced in 2 phases. So you can see a number of the lots on what is the south side of it. Those services are in and the roads are in. On the north side, there is grading going on right now, and the anticipation is that the services will go in this summer and the roads. So until that work is complete, we don't know exactly what the servicing costs are and what the share of that are for Lot 27. Related to that is that the transfer hasn't occurred at this time. So the land is still in the ownership of Three Sisters Mountain Village Property Limited. Through discussions with Three Sisters, they have some concerns that the rezoning is somewhat premature until we've sort of resolved all of those details. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. So when we look at the 2 parcels together, again, there's the orange parcel, the MR, on the left of this map, and the green parcel on the right. I should note that this is from our 2013 aerial photo, so it's a little bit confusing because the trees shown here have largely been removed as a result of the grading requirements on the site. So the proposed rezoning on these 2 lots was to take them from their current designation of PD, Public Use District, and the R3 SC District to a local commercial or a CC district. This was initiated largely because that MR, as I talked about earlier, it has less functionality, or it's a less critical piece compared to the other 6 MR parcels in the development. So responding to council's direction on that, it's also somewhat isolated in an area of development around it. So the idea was to look at potentially combining it with the community land site beside it. We've had some very preliminary conversations with the executive director of Canmore Community Housing Corporation. That site, while it would be useful, it may not be the best use of current resources given other activities that we have underway. So it is possible that we are looking at other options for one or both of those sites in conjunction with CCHC. Ultimately, that would be up to the CCHC board. So there is the possibility that we could consider disposing of both of those sites as sort of a combined package, with any resources from that going into the MR account and or into the CCHC, the PH housing account. So both of those would be very limited in what they could be done. So the funds would be separate and cannot cross over or be combined in any way. We're under strict rules around that. The idea of having a single parcel there, we've had some preliminary explorations of that. It could be the local commercial district would provide a bit of a community node there. It would allow some commercial services to serve local residents in the area, and allow that to function as a bit of a central node that's in the area structure plan as an objective in the Stewart Creek area. So I want to just back up for a moment and recall that administration is the one that that proposed the rezoning aspect of this, and upon reflection we're thinking that this may be a little bit premature at this time, pending, as I mentioned, the transfer of the community lands portion to the town, pending clear direction from council on the proposal to consider disposing of lot 28 MR, and then ultimately discussions with both CCHC and a potential developer of that site, as well as the current owner of that site and what the implications of that are. So all that to say, at second and third reading, administration is likely going to recommend that we pull the rezoning portion out of that. Ultimately, what is before you now is the bylaw that received first reading, so it does include the rezoning of those two lots. But so I know it's a little confusing for me to give you some indication of where we're headed, but there are a number of concerns that we have and have heard from. Also, depending on what we hear tonight at the public hearing, that could also alter, obviously, council's decision at second and third reading. So, just very quickly, I want to back up. There are two aspects to this bylaw, and I really want the focus tonight, hopefully, to be on the amendment to the R2A SC area. The applicant is better suited to speak to those. At first reading, I identified the four broad overarching aspects of the amendment to that. Looking at the development site is a comprehensive piece, and there's a whole bunch more information that the applicant has on that. So I won't go into any more detail, but encourage questions as council sees fit.
Thanks, Mr. Fish. Any questions of Mr. Fish at this time? Seeing none, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Talbot. I'm Vice President at Phonium Properties. The application before you tonight has the objective of what Alaric said is a bit substantial changes. I think they're minor augmentations to the existing land use, and these are to deal with the five sites within Stewart Creek Phase 3. So the area that we're looking at is highlighted in red on the slide, and that is really the multi-residential. I haven't portioned out the component in the drawing because I'm not that good at graphic arts that deals with the sites that Alaric was talking about, but we're dealing with essentially the R2A SC land use application pertaining to the multi-residential. So the five sites in question that we're focused on are identified as site 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this slide here. Okay. The existing land use has some limitations, and it does not account for the relatively steep grades that exist in Stewart Creek Phase 3. So if the land was flat, which it isn't, then the land use would function reasonably well. That's not the case. And if you can look at this diagram, you can see that, and these are averages. The average grades are all in excess of 6.5%, and in some cases, they're averaging 22%. Now, on those sites that are 6.5%, there are components of those sites that are actually quite a bit steeper. So those, again, are averages. But if one was to think about a 22% grade, that would be the equivalent, you'd have to have a set of stairs from front to back on the average size of a house going down one full level. So that's how far you drop in an average size house. So that'll give you a bit of a feel for what kind of grades those are. So they do create functional challenges when it comes to designing and building the types of residential projects which are permitted under the existing land use. So the application, if approved, would add what I focus on as two key discretionary uses to those currently present within the land use. The first proposed discretionary use is what I call above-garage residential units, and administration has deemed these to be garden suites. And the second proposed discretionary use is the addition of comprehensively designed multifamily residential. And so within comprehensively designed multifamily residential uses, detached parking structures would be permitted. So at this point, the multi-residential projects contemplated in Phase 3 will all be condominium titled, and the individual residential units and their associated parking unit would likely, in most cases, be owned by separate individuals. So again, they'd be sold on a retail basis to the public at large. So these minor additions, and I do call them minor because they're essentially improving upon the existing discretionary and permissible uses, would allow a residential unit above a detached garage. This addition would better permit the design and construction of residential product that is slope adaptive, which is one of the key components and encouraged by the town of Canmore. So in essence, what we're doing is we're taking a threeplex, and we talked about this at first reading, and we're separating the above garage unit and the garage from the duplex style units themselves. So if we look at this, here, I'll see if I can work this mouse. If we look at this scenario here, this is what we'll call the triplex. So you have the duplex units with an above garage unit that is attached. Now, if you look at this diagram, you can see that we exceed the height limitation set within the district. And that's solely because it's compressed together and the slopes are fairly severe that we're trying to deal with. Now, if we separate the garage unit and the garage from the, what will be a duplex then, you end up with a built form that is much more attractive, more functional, and also fits within the 10.5 meter height maximum. It's also slope adaptive, which is what is encouraged by the town of Canmore in their mountainous terrain guidelines. One of the current requirements of the R2A SC land use is that 35% of the constructed units have a size that is between 28 and 84 square meters, or 300 to 900 square feet. These units are classified as entry-level units, or ELH or ELU units. This requirement would remain after the amendment, and the amendment would allow us to actually place these units above the detached garages. So again, that would be the areas that would be in the green. And they're a flexible floor plan, but essentially it would overtake and they would sit on top of the garages here and become an individual unit, individually titled again with its own parking, et cetera, below, because they are condominium titles. In regard to the Site 5s, this is what would happen on Site 5. The similar type of scenario where you have the residential unit, a bit of a walkout suite would be permissible, and the above garage units could be, again, above a garage, and it's functional real estate that is attractive and it creates living opportunities for a variety of different residential owners. The second component or key component to this application is what's classified as comprehensively designed multifamily residential uses. As we're looking at 5 sites, the ability to look at and plan for 5 sites allows us to look at what each site's challenges are, and then come up with solutions that satisfy the land use as it's written, and the requirements such as the ELH or ELU units. The comprehensive design, for example, in this case, would allow us to combine all the required ELU units for the 5 sites and place them on 2 sites. And in this case, we're looking to do that on site 1, identified here, and then site 5. And those would be the first 2 sites that we're looking at developing. And that allows us to get the entry-level units away from the ridge sites, and also it allows us to keep similar product types together. So what it does is it eliminates potential conflicts down the road between disparate unit sizes. If you have a 1,000 square foot unit in one project with people that have, say, a 2,000 square foot unit, there tends to be different interests, different objectives with their units. One of the concerns that administration has expressed with what I'll call the front detached garage is the effect it has on streetscape. So we've heard their concern, and we understand their concern, and we're prepared to allow language or prepared to accept language. And I think it's mutually beneficial for us to have that language in there that deals with how the streetscape looks from the road. So instead of having a series of front garages that create just door after door after door, we'd work with administration and come up with some scenarios that break up that massing so that there's some articulation in the buildings, and you can bring pedestrian-friendly streets through and walks through the area without having just a wall of garage doors. So we have no issue whatsoever with the language in the bylaw that is proposed by administration, because we feel it's a mutually beneficial solution. Just to show you a bit of where we're going with the sites, these are just a couple 3D renderings, and the photos above, again, are just some examples. We're definitely not looking to have glass doors in our garages and things like that, but I'll give you a bit of an example how things can look if you change a bit of the exteriors. Now, you see the 2 middle pictures show styles with above garage units, and it creates a variability in product that isn't currently within the Canmore market. So we feel it's fairly attractive and it'll be desirable for people to live in. This site here is the site 2, so this is a ridge area. Again, we're looking here because we wouldn't have the entry-level units. These would be primarily more townhome units. These would be along the ridge. There's 3 sites there. And those entry-level units that would be on, resulting from this site, would be moved to site 1 and site 5. So we'd still address the minimum requirements on the overall area, and administration to date supports that, and so do we. So this would be another ridge site. This is a combination of 3 plexes and more, and again, they're more of a side-by-side product. This will allow us to have some bridges between, because again, the steep slopes, we'd have the garages closer to the road or the parking areas, and owners would access their units via bridges or walkways across. So it'd be a unique architectural element that will be attractive. And again, we haven't seen much of it in Canmore. There's a few over in on O'Neill and stuff like that have some bridge work in it, and they're very attractive, and that would bring in something unique to this area. Again, this would be another ridge site. And then finally, this would be what we're looking at in terms of site 5. Site 5 is another, what I'll call a higher density site. We'd have a combination of row townhomes, 4plexes, ELU units, and the like on this site. So this again creates a bit more of density in here, and it'd be site 5 and the site 1 that would have the ELU units. So that is all that we have in terms of this. We encourage you to support this because we feel that they're minor additions to the existing land use, and it'll bring some variability to the product and allow the ongoing success of the Three Sisters Phase 3 residential. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Just thinking about some of the visuals you presented and looking at the direction towards permitting live-work studios, you don't have any visuals that you could use that would show what you're thinking, how the live-work idea would fit into this kind of development?
So Site 1, which fronts on Three Sisters, the permissible, the use that's currently within it, and it's only on that site, would allow a live-work unit. So what we show here is we show the duplex style unit. The lower level could be a living area or it could be a work-live. And then the current land use allows parking on Three Sisters for that. Now, the theory is that there isn't a tremendous amount of visitors to the unit. So it'd be people like lawyers, the odd potter or someone like that comes in. But it traditionally, when I've seen these in Calgary and different communities, it's a scenario where it's more of a, I'll call it a white-collar office than it is a retail or anything such as that. And Allard can speak to it better than I as to whether the work-live would envision something like a retail use or if it's more of a business services use.
Sure.
And we wouldn't probably want something like that. We'd be looking towards more of that white-collar use. That's an ancillary use. So someone from Calgary that may be, working here 2 to 3 days a week that has a legal practice or some other practice that has limited vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic. We've looked at whether we do this in every unit or alternate and have a basement, just a rumpus room type build. But again, it's permitted all the way through that one site.
So in that scenario, how is the proposal different from current somebody living in a home and having their own offices in their home?
Alec?
Yeah, the live-work studio and a home occupation, a Class 2 home occupation, both allow some visitation of customers. I think the intent is, as Mr. Talbot talked about, is sort of having a lower scale. It's not intended to be a convenience store where there's a lot of coming and going. I'd need to double check the specific regulations around that. It's not entirely prohibited that I'm aware of, but I'd have to look into it more. Generally, they tend to be, in most existing areas, types of arts and crafts studios where you may have a retail component, but it's definitely a secondary nature compared to the original production of either arts and crafts or, as Mr. Talbot talked about, some sort of professional services.
Yeah, of course, the only model we have to visualize it is Spring Creek, which is largely, because it's more of a pedestrian access, it's more commercial in nature. But I'm just curious how it might play out in this district.
Yeah, I guess I would like to note that the live-work component is already part of the existing district. It's
I'm
not
just
part
trying
of
to
the
visualize
change
it. Yeah,
proposed.
thank you. Are there other questions from members of council for either admin or the applicant? Seeing none? We'll go to public submissions. So at this time, I'll invite members of the public who are here to speak to take the mic. I think you both know the rules. All three of you know the rules. 4 of you, maybe. 5 minutes. We do have this fancy equipment now that will count down, and the yellow light gives you 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
And then when it turns red, there's a really annoying beep right in front of my face. So
I'll try not to be that long.
Thank you. And if you could just start with your name and all that.
Sure. Hello, Council. Good evening. My name is Jessica Carpat. I'm here to represent Three Sisters Mountain Village today. I'd like to speak in favor of the applicant's land use redesignation, but express concern over the portion of I would say the town-initiated land use redesignation. As Alaric already expressed, there are some concerns with proceeding with that portion of the redesignation at this time for a number of reasons. We'd like to just sort out how we're going to make sure that the MR is going to be disposed, follow the proper process and procedure on that municipal reserve disposition, and also just really figure out the servicing costs on the community lands parcel prior to all of these lands being redesignated. And so we just appreciate if that could just be delayed, and so that we can work on that through the summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Jeff Laidlaw. My only issue, I won't get into this, but in the agenda package, there was a map that was included. Some land which has been spoken to as MR lands tonight is designated as PD on that mapping, and it's confusing. And frankly, I think most of it is MR and should be designated as such in your mapping.
Just to be clear, designation of MR is different from land use zoning?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep. And because
be both.
and a map which is part of an agenda package should be accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there others here that would like to speak?
My name's Ron Rempel, and I'm just speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of any organization or anything like that. But I'm in support of the land use and especially the entry-level units. I think it's a very innovative way to accomplish the entry-level units, and I think that's it's a good option for council to be considering as a way to get some more affordable housing within Canmore. I think the developer has a proven track record within the town, and so yeah, I support that, and I think that we should be looking at the opportunity for an innovative way to accomplish some affordable housing within Canmore. So, thank you. And so far, we haven't got to that annoying beep or you having to
No.
press the button for the trap door here either.
So that,
That's great. Did you get that?
thank you. Others that would like to speak?
Jan Taffel. Dear councillors and mayor, I'm opposed to this rezoning. Public hearings lately have been passed, all rezoning, whether it be a DC, they're just not listening to local opposition. If the bylaw passes, then there was no process for other potential developers to purchase town land, or to purchase the land. Garden suites are to have an alley access. There is no alley, therefore, if you are viewing the proposal as stated, then are all future garden suites, are they to be promoted? If so, there are a few residents on 11th Avenue, where I live, that are keen to build garden suites, but no legal alley exists due to Lions Park soccer field and the TransAlta right-of-way. Thank you.
Are there others here who would like to speak?
My name is Lawrence Hill. I'll see if I can be even briefer than Ron, because I basically would echo his comments. I like to see innovative zoning. It was certainly that way when it came out in the first place, with the potential for live work, but this is just taking it to another level with more opportunity for some unique housing, and as well opportunity for some affordability with the entry-level units. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any others here that wish to speak? Seeing none. I'll turn to the municipal clerk to read into the record the names of those who've provided written submission.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. We did not receive any written submissions for this bylaw.
Thank you. Are there any final comments from administration?
No. This time I do not.
Okay, in that case, I'll adjourn the public hearing at this time. And we have another public hearing in 25 minutes.